When people ask me what my favorite Christmas memory is, I usually smile, then I quietly change the subject, because for most people, Christmas means laughter, warm fireplaces, and gifts wrapped with love. For me, Christmas meant wondering what I had done wrong. My name is Eleanor Hayes, I'm 74 years old now. My hair has turned silver. The wrinkles around my eyes tell the story of a woman who smiled for others far more than she ever smiled for herself. But there is one memory that has followed me through every season of my life. A memory that still visits me every December. It began when I was 6 years old. Our little farmhouse sat at the end of a gravel road in northern Vermont. It wasn't a beautiful house. The roof leaked whenever it rained, the windows rattled whenever the wind blew, but to a little girl, it was home every Christmas Eve. I would sit by the frosted living room window and wait for my father to carry the presents inside. My younger brother, Thomas, would run around the room laughing. Mom would bake cinnamon cookies while humming old Christmas songs. From the outside, we looked like the perfect family, but families often hide their deepest wounds behind closed doors. That first Christmas I remember, Dad placed 3 beautifully wrapped boxes beneath the tree. One was large, one was medium, the smallest one had a bright red ribbon. Thomas clapped excitedly. "I bet mine is the big one." Dad laughed. "It sure is." I looked at the smallest package. It had my name on it. Eleanor. I smiled. Even a small gift was still a gift. Or so I believed. Christmas morning arrived. Thomas tore through wrapping paper like a little tornado. A brand new train set. A bicycle. A teddy bear. His laughter filled the room. Mom kissed his forehead. Dad ruffled his hair. Then Dad handed me my little box. "Merry Christmas." I hugged it carefully. "It rattles," I whispered. Maybe it was a necklace, maybe a doll. Maybe a tiny music box. I slowly untied the ribbon, folded the paper neatly, opened the lid. Nothing, the box was emptied. I blinked. Maybe the gift was hidden beneath the tissue paper. I lifted it. Nothing. I looked inside again. Still nothing. Dad laughed. Mom laughed. Even Thomas giggled because he thought it was part of a game. Dad leaned back in his chair. "You should have seen your face." Everyone laughed harder. I forced a little smile. "Ha ha ha, it came out weak. I didn't want them to know it hurt." "It was just a joke," Mom said. "We'll get you something next year." I nodded. "It's okay." But that night, I cried into my pillow where nobody could hear me. Children don't cry because they don't receive expensive gifts, they cry because they wonder why someone wanted to disappoint them. The next Christmas came again, a beautifully wrapped box again, my name again, empty. Dad laughed even harder than the year before. "It never gets old." Mom smiled. "Oh, Eleanor is such a good sport." I smiled too, because I had learned something. If I looked sad, they called me ungrateful. If I smiled, the joke ended faster. So I smiled year after year. 16 Christmases. 16 beautifully wrapped empty boxes. Sometimes they were large, sometimes tiny. 1 year they even filled the box with crumpled newspaper just to make it feel heavy. Each time, hope whispered, "Maybe this year." Each time, the empty box answered, "No." By the time I turned 22, I no longer expected anything, not presents, not apologies, not explanations, only another empty box. Life eventually carried me far away from that little farmhouse. I became a librarian in a quiet town. Books never laughed at broken hearts, they simply waited patiently for someone to open them. I married a kind schoolteacher named Walter. He loved Christmas, really loved it. He decorated every room, baked cookies that somehow always burned around the edges, sang terribly off-key. I adored him for it. The first Christmas after we married, he handed me a tiny wrapped package. My hand started trembling before I even touched it. He noticed. "Eleanor? Are you all right?" I smiled quickly. "Of course." But he gently placed his hand over mine. "You don't have to be afraid of opening a gift." Those simple words nearly broke me. I had never told him, not once, yet somehow, he saw the fear I'd been carrying since childhood. When I opened his gift, inside was a delicate silver snowflake ornament, real, beautiful, chosen with love. Tears blurred my vision. Walter looked worried. "Oh dear, did I buy the wrong thing?" I threw my arms around him. "No." My voice shook. "You bought the first real Christmas gift anyone has ever given me." He held me tightly without asking questions. Sometimes, love doesn't begin with answers, it begins with someone noticing the pain you've hidden from everyone else. Years passed. Walter and I never had children, not because we didn't want them, life simply had different plans, but every Christmas, he bought me one ornament. One small reminder that I mattered. Then, one cold December morning, everything changed. Walter suffered a sudden heart attack while shoveling snow. He never came back inside. My world became painfully quiet. The ornaments stayed on the tree, but the laughter disappeared from the house. That first Christmas without him, a package arrived on my doorstep. No return address, just my name. My hands began to shake. Not again, please, not another empty box. I stared at it for nearly an hour before gathering the courage to lift the lid. Inside, there was nothing, just empty space. And resting at the bottom, one tiny handwritten note. Read only 7 words. Grandma left one real gift. Find it. I froze. My grandmother had been gone for almost 30 years. So, who had sent the box, and what gift had she supposedly left behind after all this time? I had no idea that opening that empty box would lead me to the greatest Christmas miracle of my life, for a long time. I simply stared at the little note lying inside the empty box. Grandma left one real gift. Find it. 7 words, that was all. No signature. No address. No explanation. Outside, snow drifted quietly past the living room window. Inside, the silence felt almost alive. I slowly folded the note and slipped it into my sweater pocket. Who sent you? I whispered to the empty box. Of course, it didn't answer. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my grandmother, Grandma Rose. She always smelled of lavender and fresh bread. She had soft hands, kind eyes, and a smile that somehow made every problem feel smaller. Unlike everyone else, she never laughed when I opened those empty Christmas boxes. She would simply look away. Sometimes, I even caught tears in her eyes. As a little girl, I never understood why. Now, for the first time in decades, I wondered if she had known something I didn't. The next morning, I climbed into my old blue sedan and drove 3 hours back to the town where I grew up. Everything looked smaller than I remembered. The grocery store where Dad used to buy peppermint candy, the church where Grandma sang every Christmas Eve, the frozen pond where Walter and I had skated on our honeymoon. Time had changed the town, but memories, they never seemed to grow old. I parked in front of the old farmhouse. It had been abandoned for years. The white paint had faded into gray. Several windows were broken. The porch leaned slightly to one side. Weeds pushed through the cracked stone path. For a moment, I couldn't make myself get out of the car. Every painful Christmas lived inside that house. Every empty box, every forced smile, every lonely tear. I took a deep breath. You've survived harder things, Eleanor. Slowly, I stepped onto the porch. The wooden boards creaked beneath my feet exactly as they had 60 years ago. The front door was locked, but I knew another way. Grandma had always hidden an old spare key beneath the flower pot near the back steps. I smiled sadly. Please tell me you never changed your hiding place. I lifted the cracked clay pot. There it was, still wrapped inside a tiny piece of cloth. Ha ha ha, a little laugh escaped before I could stop it. Some things never do change. The key turned with difficulty. The old door groaned open. Dust floated through beams of winter sunlight. The house smelled of old wood and forgotten years. Nothing had moved. The rocking chair still stood beside the fireplace. Dad's hunting hat still hung near the entrance. Even the old Christmas clock remained on the mantel, stopped forever at 8:17. I slowly walked into what had once been my bedroom. The wallpaper had peeled away. The little bookshelf Dad built for Thomas remained untouched. Mine was gone. I wasn't surprised. I hadn't expected kindness from a house filled with old disappointments. Still, it stung. Then I remembered something. Grandma's room. She never let anyone throw away old things. If there were answers, they might still be there. Her bedroom door opened with a gentle push. The lavender scent was long gone, but somehow, the room still felt like her. On the bedside table sat her old reading glasses. Beside them, a tiny ceramic angel. I picked it up. Underneath, someone had taped a yellowed envelope. My breath caught. Across the front, written in elegant handwriting, were the words, "For my Eleanor." My hands began trembling. It was Grandma's handwriting. There was no doubt. I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a folded letter. The paper had grown fragile with age. I unfolded it as gently as I could. My sweet Eleanor, if you are reading this, then someone finally sent you the empty box I prayed would one day bring you home. Fresh tears blurred the page. She knew. She had known all I wiped my eyes and kept reading. Every Christmas, I watched your heart break a little more. You always smiled because you wanted everyone else to be happy, but after everyone went to bed, I heard you crying through the wall. A sob escaped my lips. Oh, Grandma, you knew. My voice cracked into silence. She had heard me every year, every single Christmas. The letter continued. I wanted to stop it. I wanted to hold you and tell you how precious you were, but your father made me promise never to interfere with the way he raised his children. I closed my eyes. For years, I had believed nobody noticed, nobody cared. I had been wrong. One person had quietly carried my pain with me. A single tear landed on the page, then another. I continued reading. I could not change your parents' hearts, but I made another promise to myself. One day, when you were ready, I would leave you something no one could ever take away. My pulse quickened. The real gift. This was about the real gift. I quickly turned the page, but there was nothing. The rest of the paper was blank. What? I whispered. No. I searched the envelope again. Empty, just like those Christmas boxes. For one terrifying moment, I thought this was another cruel joke. Then something caught my eye. At the very bottom of the page, barely visible beneath the sunlight, tiny silver letters shimmered across the paper, invisible ink. I carried the letter closer to the window. Slowly, the hidden message appeared. The gift isn't in this house. My heartbeat raced. Below it, another sentence slowly revealed itself. Go to the old library. Ask for Mrs. Evelyn Carter. Tell her. Christmas morning. I frowned. Mrs. Evelyn Carter? The name sounded familiar, very familiar. Then suddenly, I remembered. She had been Grandma's closest friend, the librarian. She had to be nearly 90 years old now. Could she still be alive? I carefully folded the letter and slipped it into my coat pocket. As I turned to leave the bedroom, a loud crash echoed downstairs. I froze. Someone was inside the house. Slow, heavy footsteps echoed across the old wooden floor. One step, then another, then a deep voice called out from below. Eleanor, I've been waiting a very long time for you to come back. My heart nearly stopped. The voice. It was deep, gentle, yet somehow familiar. I stood frozen at the top of the staircase, clutching Grandma Rose's letter so tightly that the paper crinkled in my hands. The old farmhouse had been silent for years, and no one was supposed to be here. Snow tapped softly against the broken windows. The floor beneath my feet creaked. Then the voice came again. Eleanor, please don't be frightened. I promise I'm not here to hurt you. My breathing became shallow. Every sensible part of me wanted to run, but another part, a quieter part, wanted answers. Slowly, I stepped toward the staircase. Each wooden step groaned beneath my weight. By the time I reached the bottom, I could finally see him. He looked to be in his early 80s, tall, neatly dressed in a dark wool coat, silver hair, kind brown eyes hidden behind thin glasses. He held an old leather briefcase in one hand and removed his hat the moment he saw me. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, he smiled. You look just like your grandmother. Tears instantly filled my eyes. You knew Grandma? He nodded. For over 50 years. His voice carried the calmness of someone who had spent a lifetime comforting others. My name is Samuel Carter. Carter? I whispered. Mrs. Evelyn Carter, he smiled. My wife. The name hit me immediately. The librarian? That's right. I looked around cautiously. I was just coming to see her. His smile slowly faded. I know. Rose believed you would. A chill ran through me. How? He reached into his coat pocket. Without a word, he handed me another envelope. Across the front, in Grandma's beautiful handwriting, were the words, to be given only if Eleanor returns home. My fingers trembled. When did she write this? Samuel's eyes glistened. 27 years ago. My knees nearly gave out. 27 years, Grandma had planned this. Before she passed away, I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was another handwritten letter. My precious Eleanor, if Samuel is standing before you, then you have already taken the hardest step. You came home. A tear slid onto the paper. I kept reading. I know your first instinct will be to search for treasure, money, jewelry, property. That is not the gift I promised you. I frowned. Then what was it? Grandma continued. The greatest gift anyone can receive is the truth about who they really are. My heartbeat quickened. The truth about me. I glanced at Samuel. He quietly nodded. Keep reading. There is something I never told you because it wasn't my secret to tell, but after everyone involved has gone, silence becomes another kind of lie. My mouth went dry. Another secret? How many more could there possibly be? I turned the page. The next sentence made my hands shake. Your parents didn't wrap empty boxes because they hated you. I blinked. What? No. That couldn't be right, Grandma continued. They wrapped them because every Christmas reminded your father of the greatest mistake of his life. I whispered. What mistake? Samuel quietly looked out the frosted window. I wondered when you'd ask. I looked up. You know? He nodded slowly. I was there. My heart pounded. You were there? He pulled an old photograph from his briefcase. It showed two young couples standing beside a Christmas tree. One couple was my parents, the other, a smiling young Grandma Rose and Samuel. I in the middle stood a little girl. No older than 5. Curly blonde hair, bright red coat, holding a stuffed rabbit. I stared at the photograph. Who's that little girl? Samuel's smile disappeared. Her name was Lily. I waited. Something inside me already knew this wasn't going to end well. He swallowed hard. She was your older sister. Everything inside me stopped. My sister? He nodded. She was 3 years older than you. I couldn't breathe. No, I didn't have a sister. You would have remembered. Samuel's eyes filled with sadness. You were only 2. The memories faded. I stared at him. My entire childhood had been filled with silence. No photographs. No stories. Nothing. It happened 4 days before Christmas. A terrible snowstorm. Your father was driving too fast. I covered my mouth. No. The car slid across an icy bridge. His voice cracked. Lily didn't survive. The room spun. I grabbed the back of an old chair to steady myself. Oh, my God, Samuel lowered his head. Your parents never forgave themselves. They packed away every photograph. Every toy. Every Christmas decoration. They couldn't bear to celebrate anymore. I felt tears streaming down my face. But, what about me? Samuel looked directly at me. They loved you. They simply forgot how to show it. Fresh tears blurred my vision. Grandma's letter continued. Your father believed that buying presents after losing Lily somehow dishonored her memory. Each year he wrapped empty boxes because he couldn't bear to place real gifts beneath another Christmas tree. I whispered. So, it was grief? Samuel nodded. Grief, mixed with guilt. I slowly sank into the rocking chair. All those years, I had believed I wasn't enough, that I had done something wrong. Instead, my parents had been drowning in a sorrow they never explained. It didn't erase the pain, but suddenly, the pain looked different. Grandma's letter wasn't finished. Understanding someone's pie does not erase your own. You are allowed to feel both compassion and heartbreak. I closed my eyes. That sounded exactly like Grandma, always finding wisdom where everyone else found anger. Samuel gently sat across from me. I hoped this truth would bring you peace. I nodded slowly. It helps. But, I looked around the empty farmhouse. If this isn't the gift, what is? Samuel smiled. For the first time since we'd met, it wasn't a sad smile. It was hopeful. That's why Evelyn has been waiting. I frowned. Waiting? He nodded. For over 25 years. Just then, the old front door slowly opened. A cold gust of winter air swept through the house. An elderly woman stepped inside, carrying a worn canvas bag against her shoulder. Her silver hair peeked out beneath a knitted red hat. The moment she saw me, the bag slipped from her hands. Books scattered across the floor. Her eyes filled instantly with tears. She pressed one trembling hand against her heart. Then she whispered words that made every question in my life suddenly feel much, much bigger. Oh, Eleanor, you finally came to claim what your grandmother asked me to protect, your real Christmas gift. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The icy wind drifted through the open doorway, carrying tiny snowflakes across the worn wooden floor. The elderly woman stood frozen. Books lay scattered at her feet. Her eyes never left mine. They weren't the eyes of someone meeting a stranger. They were the eyes of someone who had been waiting, praying, hoping, for one impossible moment to finally arrive slowly. She bent down and gathered the books into her arms. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "My hands aren't as steady as they used to be." I immediately knelt beside her. "Please, let me help." As I picked up the last book, I noticed the faded title, The Secret Garden. I smiled through my tears. "I loved this book when I was little." She smiled back. "I know." I looked up. "You do?" She nodded. "You checked it out 23 times from my library." A tiny laugh escaped me. "Ha ha ha, I really did, didn't I? You always said Mary reminded you that lonely people could still bloom." I stared at her. How could she remember something so small after all these years? She gently reached out and brushed a strand of silver hair away from my face. "Some children leave footprints. You left fingerprints on my heart." Those words hit me harder than anything I'd heard that day. No one had ever described me like that. Samuel quietly closed the farmhouse door behind us. The room felt warmer immediately. Evelyn placed her canvas bag on the old dining table, then she carefully removed a small wooden chest. It wasn't fancy. No gold. No jewels, just smooth oak, polished by time across the lid. My grandmother had carved one single word. Hope. My throat tightened. "Grandma made this." Evelyn nodded. "She carved it herself. 3 winters before she passed." My fingers gently touched the lid. It felt warm, almost alive. "I protected this for 27 years. Evelyn's voice trembled. "I promised Rose I would never open it." "Only you could." My heart pounded. All my life, I'd imagined treasure hidden somewhere. Money. A family secret. A forgotten inheritance. Now, the answers rested beneath my fingertips, but suddenly, I couldn't make myself open it. "What if," my voice cracked. "What if there's nothing inside?" Samuel smiled kindly. "Eleanor, you've spent your whole life expecting empty boxes." Fresh tears rolled down my cheeks. He was right. Every Christmas had taught me not to hope, not to expect, not to dream. Even now, part of me believed disappointment was waiting. Evelyn gently placed her wrinkled hand over mine. "Your grandmother spent years making sure this box would never be empty." I slowly lifted the lid. The hinges creaked softly. Inside, there wasn't gold, there weren't diamonds. Instead, there were dozens of neatly tied bundles of letters. Each bundle carried a year. Every Christmas, for over 50 years. My breath caught. "What are these?" Evelyn smiled. "Open one." I untied the oldest ribbon. Inside rested several handwritten letters. The first one read, "Christmas, 1958. I unfolded it carefully. My dearest Eleanor, today you opened another empty box. I watched you smile so your little brother wouldn't feel guilty. You were only 7 years old, yet your heart already protects other people before itself. My tears splashed onto the page. Grandma had seen everything. One day you will wonder whether you were enough. Please believe an old grandmother when I tells you this. You were never the empty one. The empty boxes belonged to people who forgot how to love without pain. A sob escaped my lips. Oh. For 70 years, I had believed I wasn't enough. Grandma had spent those same years trying to convince me otherwise. I reached for another letter. "Christmas 1965. Today you pretended your empty box was full of dreams. You told Thomas you received hope because hope doesn't need wrapping papered. I have never been prouder of anyone." I laughed through my tears. "Ha ha ha, I actually said that?" Samuel smiled. "You did. You skipped through the snow pretending your invisible gift weighed 100 pounds. I covered my face. "I'd forgotten." "No." Evelyn whispered softly. "You survived. There's a difference." I looked inside the chest again. There were photographs, school drawings, report cards, every birthday card I had ever made for Grandma, even a tiny knitted mitten I'd lost when I was 8. "You kept all this?" Evelyn nodded. "No. Rose did. She believed every child deserved someone who remembered." My heart felt too full to hold another emotion. Then, I noticed something lying beneath all the letters. A thick leather folder. My name was written across the front. I slowly opened it. Inside were legal papers, property deeds, bank documents, scholarship records. I frowned. "I don't understand." Samuel smiled. "Keep going." At the very bottom, I found one final envelope unlike the others. This one had been sealed with dark red wax. Across the front Grandma had written, "Open only after you've read everything else." My hands shook. I carefully broke the seal. Inside was one final letter. My precious Eleanor, if you've reached this page, then you finally know the truth. The real gift was never hidden inside this box. I frowned. Not the box, I continued reading. The letters were meant to remind you of who you've always been: kind, gentle, brave. The world tried to convince you that you were unloved. Don't let it succeed. I wiped away fresh tears. Then I reached the last paragraph. The final words Grandma ever wrote to me. There is one more surprise waiting for you tomorrow morning. Go to the library at exactly 9 o'clock. Someone will be waiting who has spent 25 Christmases hoping to say only 3 words. I looked up. Evelyn, who? She smiled. A smile so warm it reminded me of Grandma herself. I promised Rose I wouldn't tell you. But I can tell you this. She glanced toward the frosted window where the snow continued falling. When those 3 words are spoken, your life will never be the same again. My heart began racing all over again. Who could possibly have been waiting for 25 Christmases just to speak 3 words to me? I didn't sleep that night, not even for a minute. The old farmhouse was quiet except for the sound of the wind brushing against the windows. Grandma's wooden chest sat beside my bed every few minutes. I reached over and touched it, not because I was afraid it would disappear, but because I needed to remind myself that it was real. For the first time in 70. For years, I no longer felt like the little girl holding an empty Christmas box. I finally understood something Grandma had tried to tell me all those years. The emptiness had never been inside me. It had lived inside the silence. Morning finally arrived. Fresh snow covered everything outside. The world looked clean, peaceful, almost as if Christmas itself had decided to begin again. At exactly 8:30, Samuel knocked gently on the bedroom door. Eleanor? It's time. I smiled. I'd been ready for hours. He laughed softly. I had a feeling. The drive to the old library felt strangely familiar. The building hadn't changed much. Its red brick walls still stood proudly beneath the giant maple trees. The little bronze bell above the entrance still chimed as we stepped inside. Ding. The smell of old books wrapped around me like an old friend. I closed my eyes for a moment. Walter would have loved this place. Books, silence, warmth. He always believed libraries held more hope than any other building in town. Evelyn gently squeezed my arm. Come with me. Instead of walking toward the bookshelves, she led me downstairs. I frowned. I didn't know there was a basement. She smiled. Most people don't. At the end of the hallway stood an old wooden door painted deep green. A brass handle shone softly beneath the lights. Above it hung a tiny plaque. Rose's reading room. My breath caught. Grandma? Evelyn nodded. She helped build this room. My eyes filled with tears. She never told me. She wanted it to be a surprise. Slowly, Evelyn opened the door. The room beyond stole my breath. Sunlight poured through stained glass windows. Books lined every wall from floor to ceiling. Soft chairs surrounded a large stone fireplace. Children's paintings decorated one corner. Tiny handmade ornaments hung from a Christmas tree. Every ornament carried a child's name. There had to be hundreds of them. In the center of the room stood a long wooden table. And on that table sat dozens of beautifully wrapped presents. Real presents wrapped in colorful paper. Each one carried a child's name. I whispered, "What is all this?" Evelyn smiled through tears. Your grandmother started this tradition 30 years ago. For children who believed Christmas had forgotten them. I slowly walked closer. There were dolls, books, warm coats, toy trucks, art supplies, blankets, board games. Each package had been chosen with care. Each ribbon had been tied by hand. Samuel spoke quietly. Every year, Rose bought one extra gift. She said somewhere there was a child opening an empty box. Fresh tears rolled down my cheeks. Oh, Grandma, you remembered every child. Evelyn nodded. But one gift was never placed under the tree. She pointed toward the fireplace. A single package rested there wrapped in silver paper. A blue ribbon crossed perfectly over the top. Across the tag, in Grandma's familiar handwriting, were the words, "For Eleanor." My knees became weak. After all these years, there it was. A real Christmas present wrapped with love, not as a joke. Not to embarrass me, not to make everyone laugh, just, love. My fingers trembled as I untied the ribbon, the paper made the softest little sound. I lifted the lid. Inside, rested a tiny carved wooden snowflake. No bigger than my palm. Beneath it lay another letter. I unfolded it carefully. My darling Eleanor, by the time you open this, I will already be celebrating Christmas somewhere beyond your sight. This is the only Christmas gift I ever wished to place in your hands myself, but life had other plans. I smiled through my tears. She always wrote as though she were sitting beside me. The snowflake is carved from the old maple tree where you built your first swing. Do you remember what you asked me when you were 7? My eyebrows knitted together. Then suddenly, the memory returned. I had climbed onto Grandma's lap holding another empty Christmas box and asked, "Grandma, do you think Santa forgot my house?" She had hugged me tightly, then whispered, "No, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups lose their way." I covered my mouth. I had forgotten those words. She never had. The letter continued, "I promised myself that one day I would give you something that could never be empty. So I carved this snowflake. Every line represents one Christmas you survived with kindness still in your heart. My tears landed gently on the wooden snowflake. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't rare, but it was priceless. Because someone had made it, thinking only of me. Then I reached the final page, the last page. Grandma's handwriting seemed slightly shakier. "There is one final gift, Eleanor." Turn around, confused. I slowly lowered the letter. Then, I turned around. Standing in the doorway were nearly 50 children. Some were no older than 5. Others were teenagers. Each held a wrapped Christmas gift. A little girl stepped forward first. She couldn't have been older than 8. She smiled nervously. "Mrs. Hayes?" My voice trembled. "Yes?" She handed me a tiny present. "My mom said you helped me learn to read." Another child stepped forward. "You paid for my winter coat." Then another. "You donated books to our school." Another. "You visited me every Thursday when I was in the hospital." One by one, the children came forward, each carrying a gift, each carrying a story I had completely forgotten. Finally, an older young woman walked toward me. She looked to be about 30. She held no present, only a photograph. Tears already filled her eyes. "I was 11 when you found me crying in the library." She smiled. "You told me, every story gets another chapter." My heart skipped. I remembered her, just barely. She reached into her coat pocket, then quietly unfolded a piece of paper. "I've carried this with me for 19 years. It was the note I'd written for her. In faded ink. It still read, 'You matter more than you know. Never stop believing that.'" She looked into my eyes, then whispered the 3 words Grandma had promised I would one day hear. "You mattered too." I couldn't hold back anymore. The tears came freely, not tears of heartbreak, not tears of loneliness. These were tears of healing. All my life, I believed I had received nothing, but without realizing it, I had spent decades giving away exactly what Grandma had given me: hope, kindness, love. Samuel quietly placed his hand on my shoulder. "Eleanor," I looked at the children filling the room, the colorful presents, the glowing Christmas tree, the smiling faces. For the first time since I was 6 years old, Christmas no longer reminded me of an empty box. It reminded me that the greatest gifts are never measured by what we receive, but by the love we leave behind. And in that quiet little library, surrounded by people whose lives had touched mine, I finally understood Grandma's real gift. She hadn't left me money, she hadn't left me riches, she had left me a life so full of love, that even after all the empty boxes, my heart had never become one of them. For a while, the room was filled with nothing but quiet tears. Children smiled, teachers wiped their eyes. Samuel looked toward the ceiling as if silently thanking Grandma Rose, and I held that tiny wooden snowflake against my heart. It was amazing. 74 years, 74 Christmases, and somehow, the little girl inside me was finally smiling. The young woman who had spoken those 3 words stepped closer. "My name is Hannah." I smiled through my tears. "I remember now. You used to hide behind the history shelves." She laughed. "Ha ha ha, I thought nobody noticed." "Oh, sweetheart. I noticed. You always chose the biggest books because you said they made you feel brave." Her smile grew wider. "You remembered. I remembered you." She reached into her handbag and handed me another envelope. "I've been waiting years to give you this." I frowned. "Another letter?" She nodded. No. A promise. Curious, I unfolded the paper. At the top it read, Rose's Reading Room Foundation. Below it were hundreds of names, teachers, former students, families, volunteers. Every person had written one short sentence. Thank you for believing in me. You helped me finish school. You bought my first dictionary. You visited my mother in the hospital. You made me feel seen. You taught me reading wasn't scary. You gave me my first Christmas gift. The tears came all over again. There weren't 10 names. There weren't 50. There were hundreds. I whispered. All these people. Samuel smiled. They came because of you. I never did anything extraordinary. Evelyn shook her head. No. You did something much harder. You kept choosing kindness after life gave you every reason not to. The room erupted in gentle applause, not loud, not overwhelming, just warm, the kind of applause that wraps around your heart instead of your ears. Then a little boy tugged gently on my sleeve. He couldn't have been older than 6. His cheeks were rosy from the cold. He looked up at me nervously. Mrs. Hayes? Yes? He held out a tiny wrapped package. My grandma says lonely people shouldn't open presents alone. My lips trembled. What is your name? Oliver. I smiled. Would you help me open it? His eyes lit up. Really? I'd love that. Together, we carefully untied the ribbon. Inside was a handmade ornament shaped like a book. Across the front, in uneven little letters, it read, You are loved. I looked at Oliver. Did you make this? He nodded proudly. My grandma helped me spell the words. I hugged him gently. Thank you. He whispered something so softly that only I could hear it. I hope nobody gives you empty boxes anymore. My heart nearly broke. I kissed the top of his head. They won't. Not anymore. That afternoon, the library hosted its annual Christmas celebration. Children filled every chair. Parents laughed together. Hot chocolate warmed cold hands. Christmas songs floated through the room. For the first time in decades, I wasn't watching other families celebrate. I was part of one. Not because we shared the same blood, but because we shared the same kindness. As the evening came to an end, Samuel quietly approached me. There is one last thing. I smiled. I was wondering if Grandma had one more surprise. He chuckled. Rose always had one more surprise. He handed me a tiny brass key. What does it open? The old mailbox outside your grandmother's house. I laughed. Ha ha ha, of course. There was always one more mystery. The next morning, I drove back to the farmhouse one last time. The snow sparkled beneath the winter sun. The old mailbox still leaned beside the gravel road. Its faded red paint had nearly disappeared. I slipped the little brass key into the lock. Click, the tiny door opened. Inside, there was one final envelope. No stamp. No address. Only 4 words, for Christmas morning. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was Grandma's final message. My precious Eleanor, if you are reading this, then you smiled. Again. A tear rolled gently down my cheek. She knew, she somehow knew. When I first held you as a baby, I made a promise. I promised that no matter how difficult your life became, I would leave enough love behind to help you find your way home. I looked toward the old farmhouse, the place that had once held so much hurt. It no longer felt heavied, it simply felt finished. The letter continued. Please don't spend your remaining years remembering empty boxes. Remember every heart you filled instead, because love has a remarkable way of returning when we least expect it. At the bottom of the page, she had written just one final sentence. Merry Christmas, my beautiful girl. I pressed the letter against my heart. For the first time in my life, someone had called me that, not as a child who wasn't enough, not as someone to be laughed at, but as someone deeply loved. I looked up toward the bright winter sky. The snow fell slowly around me. Somewhere in the distance, church bells began to ring. Merry Christmas, Grandma. I smiled. And thank you for giving me the one gift that could never fit inside a box. Years later, when people visited Rose's reading room, they often noticed something unusual beneath the Christmas tree. There was always one beautifully wrapped empty box. Children would point at it and ask, "Why is that one empty?" I would kneel beside them with a smile and say, "It only looks empty." Then I'd gently place my hand over my heart. The most important gifts can't be wrapped. Every Christmas, a child who felt forgotten would leave that room carrying a real present, and something even more valuable, the certainty that they mattered, because no child should ever believe they are an empty box and no Christmas should end without hope. That became Grandma Rose's legacy, and by the grace of one real gift, it became mine too.